There's a difference between being disappointed and being devastated. Disappointment is when life doesn't go your way. Devastation is when you bet your whole existence on something.
So there I was, Pastor Stephen was talking about the difference between being devastated and disappointed. And in that moment, I knew that I was devastated. My mom was just larger than life. She was a force. And suddenly, about a week before my 16th birthday, she passes away. This really shook the foundation of our family. I remember as a teenager not really knowing how to process death, thinking about life, thinking about how I would have to grow up without her, how I would have to, transition into adulthood and womanhood without my mom. I think this was the first time I learned what it meant to have a heavy heart. And as I'm working my way through the grief, picking up the pieces, my little brother suddenly passes. And I really can't describe the amount of pain. I just felt like I was punched in the gut again without an opportunity to catch my breath, just back to back. My grieving heart started to turn into a bitter heart. I started to feel a little bit of bitterness towards God and a little bit of anger. And I think I was, vulnerable and just anxious and made some decisions I probably shouldn't have. I met a young gentleman. We started a relationship, fast and furious, and he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. And about 3 months before the wedding, I called things off because it became painfully apparent to me that I was in an abusive relationship. I knew that this was something I couldn't go forward with. About a year and a half later, I met another gentleman who we seemed very compatible. Everyone thought we were good together. He was the polar opposite of the previous gentleman. So I thought, okay, here we go. 2 years into our relationship, he tells me that he thinks we are not compatible. We're incompatible. And I fell into very deep depression, into a really dark space, because it just felt like, I would ask God, how much can one heart take? Grief after grief, heartbreak after heartbreak. It felt like my heart was, shattered into a million little pieces and just didn't know where my life was heading. And in this state, I decided I wanted a clean slate. And so I moved from Boston to the DC area. So I Googled churches in the area and sort of created my church hopping list. The next Sunday was the Christmas service. It was a service that I've never been able to forget because my life essentially took a 180.
You give me 12 months of your life, you will not recognize yourself. There will be gifts inside of you that you didn't even know that you had, that God has unearthed inside of you. Your marriage, your resources, your relationships will be on a whole nother level.
So in that year, I had committed to just chase after God with everything that I had. And God really used the environment of community, joining connect groups, leading connect groups. It was almost like a flower in full bloom. Started to understand who I was in Christ, walk with my head a little higher, my shoulders a little straighter, and just started to serve and empower other women with the gifts that God had endowed in me. I entered into a time of intentional singlehood, so I just really wanted that time to be sacred and to build my foundation again, because I knew that there were cracks. And so I poured myself into serving, really forgot about the fact that I was, single, forgot about the fact that I had said I would give God 12 months, just because I was so full and felt so whole. And just as I get that sense of peace to go forward with dating, the world shuts down. Global pandemic. Everyone's cooped up in their houses. No one's going out. No one's socializing. So in my mind, I'm like, God, this is really. Little did I know that God was working in the midst of a pandemic, and I connected with another leader on the prayer team virtually who I had been serving with for quite some time, and one thing led to another, and we connected and started to date virtually initially, and one thing led to another, and within 3 months we were engaged. And we've been married now for about a year and a half. And it's just so incredible to see how God worked through every season and just how he brought us together. There's no special formula. There's no secret sauce. It's just as simple as a decision to say yes to God, to let him in, to surrender your life to Christ. And he can bring beauty from ashes, just as he did for me. He can turn your life around to the point that you will not be able to recognize yourself. All you gotta do is just lean in, let him heal you, get in community, and he'll do it for you the same way he did it for me.